Welcome to the Mind of Business Success podcast. I'm your host, Alicia Cramer. I have my friend Bridget with us today. We are going to talk about how you can leverage the power of PR to grow your business. Welcome to the show, Bridget.
Hey, Alicia, I'm glad to be back. This is fun.
This is going to be a power-packed conversation. You are an amazing entrepreneur and amazing at what you do. I think that this is also going to be a super valuable conversation for our listeners because this is an area we haven't delved into very deeply up to this point. And I mean, geez, how many episodes are we in now? Like hundreds. I don't even know. I think it's somewhere between 200 and 300. In any case, a lot of business owners have a high level understanding of PR. Some business owners don't even know what PR stands for. They're like, what? Okay, I've heard PR. What does that acronym actually mean? I want to dive deep into maybe some tips and some tricks and things like that that our listeners can actually implement. But before we get into that, can you give us a breakdown, kind of high level, school us on what PR actually means for the average small business owner?
Totally. And I'll probably say we throughout this conversation. I do have a business partner. Her name is Lydia. I'm Bridget. And this is like the biggest topic for so many small business owners because they just don't understand it. They don't really see how this has a functionality in their small business, in their online business. And we're here to like kind of break the illusion of what this is. So like PR is public relations. Now, I luckily have a background in communications. I studied this in college, although I wasn't implementing it until years later. Having this understanding is like step one. So public relations. This is all about how like the public actually perceives your brand. Now you have owned media channels, and those are like your social media where you are putting out, this image of your brand, what you do, who you serve. That's your website. It's like all of your owned communication to the world. Then you have earned media, which is where you're getting featured. Maybe you're getting interviewed. Maybe you're going to be on TV. And then you also have paid media, and that's really what we see as advertising. So I'm going to focus today's conversation on earned media, and this is all about how you can share your message on other people's platforms. I'm sure you're familiar with the term OPA, but we love sharing our message on other people's platforms because then you get in front of a whole new audience. You get to share your expertise, you get to share your credibility. I think as a business owner, it's also fun. You get to go on interviews like this, you get to be mentioned in the media. So there are many different functionalities of PR, but I think that's like a good little starting place for us.
I am such an advocate for PR. I'm just going to tell a really, really quick story. When I started my hypnotherapy practice, I was doing freelance business development consulting work on the side. That was sort of my side hustle as I was opening and starting my hypnotherapy practice. And one of my clients was a PR agency. So I had the privilege of learning how to write press releases. Now, when I launched my hypnotherapy practice, I used that to my advantage and I wrote myself up a press release and I sent it out to all of the local media. And the local newspaper in my relatively smallish town said, yeah, let's come in. And they brought the photographer and the journalist, and they did the photos in my office, me sitting at my desk, and they wrote up, this great piece about this new hypnotherapy practice that's opening and my experience, my qualifications, certified from the only nationally accredited college of hypnotherapy. And that newspaper article literally had my phone ringing every single day. That was what launched my business. Now, fast forward, there were other times where I would, do something that was sort of newsworthy. But when I wrote my first book, got a little piece. Years later, because of all of the marketing and stuff that I had been doing, I actually was actively involved in a tech startup with a business partner. And I still was doing my coaching and hypnotherapy practice, but as a serial entrepreneur, I've always been sort of like my hands in everything. And all of a sudden, I get contacted by this guy from Forbes magazine. And I was like, this is incredible. Like I wasn't even trying. But he was doing a piece on hypnosis for business. And because of all of the work that I'd been doing up to that point, right? Putting out content and marketing and stuff like that. Well, when you type in hypnotherapist, guess who comes up on Google? And I had all my, skills and credentials and experience. And so he interviewed me for the piece that he was doing that went, online. It's still, you can search it. It's still online to this day. And for years after that article was posted online, people would contact me and they'd say, "Hey, I found you on the article on the Forbes website."
Mhm.
That's the power that we're talking about here. So now, where does someone start? Now, I mentioned I was brand new, and it worked for me. I mentioned that I was a little bit more established and it worked for me.
Yeah.
For someone who is maybe a little intimidated, a little overwhelmed, can we talk a bit about maybe some of the different options, kind of like a DIY or hiring? Where do you even begin?
Yeah. I also love that story. I mean, that's such a great show of the ripple effect of what can happen when your name is out there. And remember that, you mentioned this too, because it lives on the internet forever and because Forbes is such a highly trafficked site, it then likely backlinked to your website, helping you show up higher in search rankings as well, which is like a whole other component of backlinks and domain ranking and SEO. We won't go into that today, but that's where this can go. It really does compound and build over time. So we always say you want to be building a press trail, and you always start with the end in mind. It's like, well, what is the purpose of that for you? Is it just to build brand awareness? Is it that you would love to be interviewed on numerous, not even just local TV stations, but national TV stations? Would you love to be on some of the biggest podcasts? Are you really focused on the credibility and trust that can be built through big magazines like Forbes, Entrepreneur, Inc., Success, some of these bigger names in the space? So that's where we always start with goals. Now, as a business owner, you have options. So, like you said, you can go to a PR agency where you might be working with a number of different people who basically have you as an account and they're going to be representing you. So, they'll be doing this media contacts, they'll be reaching out, they might be sending out press releases so that maybe you have a new product or a new brick and mortar location. Was the hypnotherapy brick and mortar?
Yep.
Yeah, so that's great for that because the local media loves local talent. It helps, bring the community together. They want to highlight you. That's where it can really be a huge win. So they might be doing that for you. Then you can also work with, a publicist who might be with a smaller boutique agency. And for instance, my business partner, Lydia, that's what her agency is. It's her, she's doing the pitching, she's representing you, she's writing the pitches, she has the contacts with the media. And that's why you might think about hiring out because they already have the relationships with the media. Right. Maybe they've already, spoken to writers at Forbes who have written articles for them before, and they simply introduce a new client where they're like, hey, we have another hypnotherapist. They can speak on these topics. Let us know if you'd be ever interested in an interview. Then there's the DIY option, and that's really where Visibility on Purpose, our company, came to be in the first place because we did realize that there is a barrier to entry with cost for some of these agencies. You're likely going to be on retainer for like 6 to 12 months because it does take time. Like that's the truth of it. It's not overnight sales. It's not really a sales function, although it's a cousin of sales and marketing, absolutely. So for those who didn't have the time, we were like, okay, well, we're going to just equip them with the tools and resources. And I think we really need to begin at the base level, which is like, how does the media work? Because this is like an animal that most people don't really understand, like the inner workings of. So When we describe how the media works, it's always about understanding that there's a synergistic relationship between the experts and the sources, which are people like you who can speak on topics like hypnotherapy or business development or leadership. And then there are the writers at these magazines or the producers or these podcast hosts that are tasked with, writing articles to produce for their specific, outlet that they might work for. They might be a staff writer, they might be a freelance writer, they might just be a podcast host of their own show. And it's about understanding that you, as a source and expert, you have value to bring to the media, right? Because they actually need your expertise and your credentials to make their story better. And especially when we're talking like big magazines, they need the most credentialed people, right? So they're going to look at like, okay, is she actually certified in hypnotherapy? Around COVID, like they needed actual doctors, not just people who, said had an opinion about it. So it's about really establishing your authority and your expertise. And this is where like I feel like everyone listening can, sit back for a moment and be like, what is my expertise? I'm sure many people on here have credentials, they have background, they have history, they have expertise in doing this for quite a period of time. So that's kind of where we want to start.
So the DIY, let's talk about that for a moment, because that is, you and I were talking before we hit the record button, that a lot of CEO, business owner, founders don't really have time to be learning the ins and the outs of what is the media actually want? How do I contact them in a way that gets me noticed? What is the right approach to do this? What are realistic goals and expectations? What's a good hook? All of that type of stuff. But for those business owners who maybe don't have the resources, and so they've got to carve out a little bit of time, maybe they're still in those early stages where they want to build up that credibility. They want to be able to say, I've been featured in Forbes and Entrepreneur and wherever, right? Even your local media. What is a realistic expectation for someone who is invested mentally, emotionally, they're putting their time, their energy, their effort? What is a realistic expectation for learning this skill and implementing it, and what type of results the average entrepreneur could expect?
I mean, we have clients that have gotten themselves on Forbes, Newsweek, USA Today. Like it's absolutely possible. I've gotten myself an entrepreneur. Like it's absolutely possible to do it yourself. It is just going to take time. And I think what we need to remember is, what does the media want to hear about? They want what's timely, relevant, newsworthy, and interesting. So it's not just about like what you love. It's also about understanding what is the value proposition that you're bringing to the table. So what are they actually putting out content on? You can think about the seasons, you can think about the holidays, you can think about current events, you can think about what's happening in your local community, and then find that like sweet spot where you are the perfect source. So there is, a step before you ever reach out to the media, and it is positioning. You have to be able to position the brand in a way that the media is going to be interested in, because these writers, we have a podcast called Visibility Error. We interview writers at magazines. They get hundreds of emails a day. I'm sure you get pitches for your podcast. It's that same thing. So you have to be asking yourself, okay, what's going to stand out? So we need to do a little bit of the prep work before we actually go out there. And this is what we would call, writing a pitch. Now, most business owners have been to some sort of networking event where they are going to, share their pitch. When we think about the media, I want us to think about it in terms of not just like interview me, I'm the coolest person ever, but understanding what that outlet wants, what is going to be interesting to them, what kind of content that writer is actually already putting out, what kind of, shows that producer is already putting out, and then figure out how you can actually be the person that they're looking for, add the value. right? So understanding that equation, I think, is going to help someone. So, step one would be, set your goals. Step two, we need to brand position ourselves. We need to be able to position ourselves in a way that's going to stand out. Step three, we want to be thinking about, okay, what topics could I speak on? And likely, if you're a business owner, you're sending out emails on these topics, you are creating content on these topics already, you might have already been interviewed on that. So that's going to be helpful because then this is the angle I can take. We call this a story angle. Right. So maybe there's a writer who's putting out content on like Mother's Day gifts, and you own a candle company. So you want to figure out that way that you can be the perfect add-on to the article that they're going to be putting out and producing. And then the next step would be contacting and building relationships with the media. And that is not the easiest feat. However, there are platforms, I'm sure everyone knows about Harrow, but that is changing. You know Harrow.
Mhm.
Right, Alicia? So Help a Reporter Out is actually changing to a platform called Connectively, where it's going to be paid. So unfortunately, everyone kind of wants to get on the bandwagon, but there are other platforms like featured.com and welovequoted.com that connect the source to the media. So there are ways of doing this. And then, of course, there's going to be the organic way, which is you doing the research, you connecting with the writer. Writers oftentimes spend lots of time, and producers of TV show or hosts of TV shows, time on LinkedIn, time on Twitter. There's a hashtag called journo request on Twitter where they're actually just reaching out to, anyone following them on Twitter, and they're saying, hey, I need a source for this story. So you can begin to take those footsteps. And I think what's important to know is if you've never had any press, likely Forbes is not going to put a full page spread just about you, right? You haven't proven that you're newsworthy yet. This is why we have to build the press trail. So we always recommend starting with some of these media mentions where you are featured in an article that's going to link back to your website, boosting your domain SEO, boosting your authority. You leverage that in your future pitches to get more. So from a DIY perspective, it's absolutely possible. You do need to have some media training so you know what to do, who to contact, just like some etiquette around how the industry works, because they're going to be annoyed if you're just saying like, interview me, I'm the coolest person ever. So I think that's a good place where people can start if they have the time.
You dropped so many valuable tips in there. um People are gonna have to re-listen and write these things down. I'll tell another real short story about Haro, because obviously, I've been doing this for over a decade now. So, oh my goodness, I don't even remember how long ago it was that I first heard about Haro. And in those early days, I was still the scrappy bootstrapping entrepreneur. And so I was actively looking for opportunities to pitch. And it was through Haro that I was on ESPN radio and some pretty big name, business podcasts, radio shows. Um, you just have to be open sometimes to doing the work. And, I have to say that now the thought of putting that much time into it is definitely daunting. And so there's a season for these different types of options. So for an entrepreneur who is in the sowing their seeds season, the DIY is really good. And when you're in the season of sort of reaping all of the rewards of the hard work that you've done to build yourself up to this point, then I think there is so much more value in having a professional step in and help. I want to talk real briefly because I know that at least at this point in time, maybe if somebody's listening to this in a year or two, you may not be doing this anymore. But right now, you are offering training for a business owner's assistant or someone on their team to actually learn how to do these things for them. Let's talk about this for a moment, because sometimes having an in-house PR person is the best option. So let's spend a little bit of time talking about what that looks like.
Yeah, so this kind of came organically. We've been running our program. It's a media training program called Pitch Party for the last year and a half. And one thing we found pretty quickly was, okay, the founders, they really want this, but they just don't have all the time to do it themselves. So now they know the tools. And we always said, hey, you're welcome to have your team come and do this for you. Like, no worries, we get it. And out of that, we started to recognize and realize that there's members of the team or a virtual assistant, even a social media manager, an assistant on the team who could benefit from being directly trained. So yes, we have a PR assistant certification program where you're going to be trained by, a publicist, my business partner, and me, who's been just implementing these things every day. So things like, how do I onboard my client? What do I ask? How do I develop a press strategy? What outlets do I look into? How do I write a pitch? Just etiquette around the media. How do I coordinate interviews? How do I leverage it for the client? Because that's really the role of a publicist. And yeah, if you can train that in-house, I mean, that's incredible. You could keep the program for yourself. God forbid that person goes elsewhere, but at least you have that person on your team who you can, intimately work with. And I have heard many conversations around like some people not loving working with agencies because after that contract is ended, you kind of are just like stuck there. You don't even have the information to do it yourself, right? So we just want to empower the business owner, teach them everything we know, maybe train a team member, just like give them the tools that we know and just make it a little bit more simple for them to implement a press strategy and get the features that they want and they deserve. Like all these business owners have been doing the cool things for years and more people should know about it.
I think it's amazing. I mentioned to you that a couple years ago, I purchased a program. It wasn't as in-depth as the one that you offer. It was more focused on like articles
Okay.
specifically. And so I bought the course and I gave my assistant access to it. And I said, watch this, learn this stuff, go out and do this stuff. Not everybody has the right skill set mindset to be your PR representative. And so it's important that you make sure you've got the right team
Yes.
member to take on that role. Just like you wouldn't want just anybody doing a sales position or just anybody doing a customer service position. Different people have different skill sets. What are some of the skill sets you think are most important to be successful at this type of reach out?
Yeah. So most of our clients are US based, although we do have clients in Australia and Europe. So fluent English is number one. Fluent English with incredible communication skills, because a lot of what you're doing is going to be writing, right? You are going to be sending out email communications. You're going to be responding to queries. Maybe, the media is coming to you and saying, hey, I need a source for this story. You need to be able to position the founder then in a really proper way. So it's all about communication skills here. You need to be a good communicator. You need to be a skilled writer. You also probably want to enjoy what you're doing. There is some like catch and chase aspect of, I'm sure when you got the Forbes, you're like, oh my God, this is amazing, right? So you do want to be that person that likes a little bit of like putting the legwork in, knowing that you're like putting something out there into the world and then hoping, it comes back to you. So I think that personality trait is also going to be helpful. That person that likes a little bit of the chase, a little bit of the effort into it to receive the reward and benefit.
Awesome. This is probably the perfect time for me to ask how our listeners can connect with you if this is something that they want to go deeper into. Maybe they're interested in the training program that you offer for a team member. Maybe they're in the DIY. They want to learn it. They want to implement it. They want it to be an important component of their overall business marketing strategy. Maybe they want to connect with you to get in touch with your business partner who offers the service. Can you share with our listeners what's the best way to connect with you?
Sure. Yeah. So we are all things visibility on purpose across all the social channels. A podcast is called Visibility Era. And then I think a great place to start is I'll send this link in we'll add it to the description of the video, but we have a PR starter pack. It's just a freebie. So it is going to be media 101, like how does this work and what do you need? So it goes through our PR checklist, which is everything that you need as a business owner to have prepped behind the scenes. Like, how do you talk about yourself? What is a bio? Do you have headshots? Just some of these like nitty-gritty pieces that you want to have. Whether you're going to be pitching yourself, if you go to an agency, they're going to be so happy that you have all this already prepped. Or if your assistant's going to do it for you, it's going to be that same process. So we can put the link to the PR starter kit in the description of the video.
Perfect. I said this was going to be a great episode, and you definitely delivered. This is one of those episodes people are going to have to probably listen to a second time with a pen and paper to take down some of the different tips that you shared and the different resources that people can utilize to start to put this into practice. So thank you so much, Bridget. I knew you were going to be great. I knew you were going to over deliver. I really thank you from the bottom of my heart for everything that you're doing. You're such an amazing person.
Thanks, Alicia.
And thank you to all of our listeners. We're doing this for you. If you haven't already subscribed, make sure you do so. And until next time, we will see you in the next episode.